What's going on, everybody? This is Brent031. I appreciate everybody tuning in. And this is a special stream. I've got my good buddy who was my company first sergeant during OIF 1. So the initial invasion into Iraq in 2003 when I was just a boot lance corporal. And here he is, Sergeant Major Lawrence Archambault, United States Marine Corps, retired.
Hey, good evening. Thank you again for inviting me back. I know the first experience was a little technically broken, but hopefully we can move along a little further with this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you came back. And we thought, just talking amongst the two of us, we thought it'd be a great idea to, you being the company first sergeant at the time, actually kept somewhat detailed notes on the daily routine and the daily activities that we did during the 2003 push into Iraq. And to be quite frank, because of the duration of the war and how long it lasted, not very many people remember or even talk about, for that matter, the invasion. And I just don't think there's very many resources out there. There's the documentary, I think it was Severe Clear,
right?
And then you had the HBO miniseries Generation Kill, which was based off of the recon unit, which coincidentally was pretty close.
Yeah.
Pretty close to us. So
and they're mentioned several times throughout my notes. Because we came across them throughout the methods of techniques we used to move units past each other and to isolate areas and block off and so on and so forth. It was just natural that we passed LAR and recon and other units that were within the 1st Marine Regiment or attached to it or fighting forward of it. So it was a good experience to know who your friends are.
Yeah. All right. So you and I have been talking about this for a while, and to your credit, you've actually, being a company first sergeant during the invasion, you actually kept somewhat detailed notes during the push, and you sat down and you've essentially collected those notes and some with the use of reference from some other materials, kind of developed a timeline and put them into a single document. And what I'd like to do with you tonight is pull up that document and not, necessarily reading word for word, but just kind of paraphrasing it. And I'm going to pull this document up so everybody can see it, so that, the people that are seeing it can read it for word. But I just kind of like to go through day by day, kind of your thoughts on, what you put down in this document. And, I was just a boot lance corporal at the time, so I didn't keep no, detailed diary, but, if I remember some things, I might interject on my recollections of those same events as well. So
yeah, I sure can. It kind of ties back into why I did this is the research of history of previous wars, and then when you brought up your podcasts with veterans of Iraq, specifically OIF 2 and onward, because I felt OIF 1 got a little overlooked, and I don't think your generation can really grasp or comprehend the accomplishment that was achieved by such a young group of men in such a short period of time. And it does tie into the movies that you talked about, the HBO series and Severe Clear, and going back and looking at our own wars. It was hard for me because these not only are words on a book or images on a video. These are memories that spark emotion deep down inside that need you kind of put off, and if you don't have to deal with it, and I come to realize I got to deal with it. And so you gave me the strength to take a look at this, and for what it's worth, I want to say the Marines of not only Bravo Company but 1-4 and Inchon and Blue Diamond, well done. And we did our best. We knew who our enemy was and wasn't. We couldn't save everybody, but we saved a lot of lives. Probably a lot more than we took.
Oh yeah, I mean, look at if you look at the current conflict in Ukraine, look how many Russians have been killed trying to invade Ukraine, and they weren't successful. The feats that we accomplished during the invasion. We took down what once was, I believe, the 3rd largest army in the world during the Desert Storm era. So, anyways, let me go ahead and pull up that document and we can get started.
And again, I put this into a format that that most Marines can comprehend. I mean, it's just a standard report format. Subject it's from my journals from Operation Iraqi Freedom 1. And I don't cover the entire operation from deployment to redeployment or even OIF 2. I just cover the period we're ashore in Kuwait, and I'm up to April 7th right now. So there's probably going to be a part 2 of this, but kind of gives you an idea of where we're going with it. And again, it's from me. Reference A is a Thomas guide I was provided by the 1st Marine Division S2 or Blue Diamond S2 to use as a road reference, map reference. And again, we use this, I'll explain here in a minute what we used it for. But I kept a lot of notes on here along with, I had a green journal notebook I also kept after we stopped moving. And then I had a detailed alpha roster and gear roster, stuff like that we had to keep records of as well daily. So those were a lot of stuff going on. And some of this is kind of funny because you say you kept good details. It's like, yeah, think of yourself now and then if you had to do that right now, you would be doing the same thing. You'd be like a mother hen. You know what? Yeah, looking after.
100%.
Yeah, and that's kind of what happens. You become that. You got to watch everything, know what's going on, keep your situational awareness because you got to keep your head when others don't, and that's usually what senior leadership is there for, is provide that training and guidance. I was recently, like I said, let me read this for you, and we'll move on here. I was recently motivated by you, Sergeant Major Brent Downing, who I knew was a Marine in Bravo Company 1-4 during OIF 1 and 2. He was a corporal, lance corporal. He now hosts a podcast which speaks directly to combat veterans, which I like your stories because each one is different, and we'll get to that too. Which I felt was often which I felt OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom, was often glossed over. Which started in me to look in my notes a lot more. And again, the following timeline is from my notes and experiences supported from the publications of the 1st Marine Division history. And as you remember, it's from my point of view, and even though we have gone through the same events, your perspective, memory, and experiences are different because mainly for the fog of war. The majority of the information was transcribed from reference A, which is the Thomas Guide of Maps. And again, provided to me from 1st Marine Division. Very small detail. It's not high detail. I know you can't see very well, but let it focus a little bit. But it's that kind of map where you go through and you can make your notes, and you'll see I had phase lines done. I had notes on it. I have date time groups. I have RCTC objectives and something. It's not classified. It's no longer classified. So it's just operational stuff that is no longer useful or purposeful. But it was good as a historical perspective to look back in my experience because, again, this year, not only through your example of going through your podcast with the other veterans and trying to deal with my experiences and get over the fear of looking back because you need to. And with upcoming anniversaries, I wanted to go face to face with some of my demons, and this is kind of the way of doing it. I'm very general in a lot of things because I don't want to go into any detail because I don't have anybody's permission to mention or anything else, and I'll leave it as it is. You understand how things go for security and stuff like that. But I also want to make sure that the young Marines and sailors that took part in this, they did it with honor, courage, and commitment, right? And they did it with goodwill. It's hard to say. You went to war with goodwill, but we did go to war with goodwill. And the Iraqi people weren't our enemy, just those that opposed us. So it was a little different for everybody, like I say, the perspective. But I think as a whole, as a force, we went in there more as a friendly force to secure the area and then provide for elections, which we did the following 2 years. Right, it took 2 years to do it, but we finally got it done right at the end of 2004 and five, and then we left. For you ended up going back, I think, what, two more times. That was my last trip to Iraq was after 05. So, but it's just, I don't want to get too sidetracked. Yeah, but that got me into the writing this experience, and that's why it's so different, because I'm still trying to piece it together from my notes and also from my experience. But I also had some other reasons to go into it, and they were mainly medical, because I had a couple seizures this year, and cognitively, I had a big gaps there. And I'm trying to piece them together, and this was one of them. And not that it's a gap, it's just that because I didn't go and look at it as much before, it forced me to pull out things I wasn't looking at before. And oh yeah, I remember too painfully well, but I do. But I'm, again, this is therapy for me. Another one of those projects that we all take on, and I'm happy to do it, because I think historically the young Marines need to see and how special this really was. That I'm still amazed to this day that, we were able to get this done in the way we did it. All right, I'll go through this. And again, the Thomas guide was provided by the Blue Diamond S2. I carried the guide from March 03 to June 03 in the empty front ballistic plate pocket of my vest. So you pull it open. You're supposed to have a ballistic plate that slides in, and you close it. We only had one plate, and I chose to put mine in the back so I could carry my gear up front. I also had a radio on the back too, so I was pretty heavy. If I don't know, it doesn't matter where you wear it. If it's your time, it's your time.
If I can just add one thing on that, so there was a shortage of SAPI plates, and that's why most guys only had one. And I remember the shortage was with mediums. So if you were a bigger guy like myself and had large, I had two SAPI plates stepping off, but most guys only had one.
Yeah, and the one I did have, I could barely fit in the back. So you'll see here. Take a look at this painting from remember the chaplain picture from OIF2 in Najaf. I'm doing a painting of it, and that's kind of the. Anyway, sorry about that. That's kind of you see the bulge on the plate is because you see the wrong size plate in the gear, and then with the weight of the harness, it just kind of doesn't wear right. It wears sideways on your body, and it's really not comfortable. So you as a big guy, you were kind of blessed that you had the opportunity to do that for us. I'm only 5'7", and I'm not that big, so I'm a medium or a small, and there just wasn't enough of them. And by the time I got one, which I'm always the last as the enlisted senior, yeah, you get I was lucky I got one that wasn't cracked or already shot. So that's the way I looked at it. Anyways, I used to carry that in my vest. So anytime we had to stop or I had to take some notes, or I was tracking something or a key event, I'd take it out in whatever location we're at. I'd make a date time group entry in my little code, and so I could decipher it and use it for reference later on. Because you always had to do awards, you had to do history, you had to do those kind of things as part of the administrative staff of a company, battalion, regiment, whatever. And that's part of the reason why I kept it. Plus, we also kept it for other reasons, is medevacs, had to know fire support, know our location, general awareness, those kind of things. Due to, and I always marked it with a date time group. And again, that's just a military just habit of doing it that way. Other portions will be are filled in by the Blue Diamond history, which is reference B, which we'll find in green on these notes. So you'll see my notes in the yellow daytime group, and then you'll see the notes off the map. You see in my back right shoulder. I'll pull it down here in a second. It's the 1st Marine Division history of OIF 1, and then or OIF more or less up to the point I think of 2006 or 7. I mean, that's when I got the map. I was on recruiting when I got that map, and I just happened to keep it because it was put it up in my office for a little while, and then nobody even looked at it, and so I took it down. Okay, let's get you ready to get underway. Okay, timeline. We're in January of 2003. We already know the buildups going on. Hussein's already got the warning, right? In hindsight, he refused the central bank in the ultimatum from the global leaders, and they're going to go out and get him. Okay, and this is the so the writing was on the wall already. The deployment of the 1st Marine Division was already underway for Operation Iraqi Freedom as early as December of 2002, but being an RCT-1 and its equipment, we embarked aboard the Navy ships heading to out of San Diego in January 2003 for slow movement to Kuwait. And then we meet up the rest of the division, which flies into Kuwait, and they offload gear and pre-positioned shipping in mid-March 2003. So we had the long 45-day journey, and they had the quick flight offload assembly area wait. I don't know which one is worse. I think we made good use of the time. My last time on ship was in 98, 99 with the 13th MEU with BLT-21 as I was an artillery operations chief with Tango 511. And of course, we won't document the time we spent on ship from January to mid-March. And that's a whole nother segment for me. I think that's a whole other area that require probably small unit training and leadership. Seminar type stuff would be a good example of what that would be used for, because I think we used good use of the time for what we had, both day and night training.
Yeah, and if I can interject on that, I felt that I got more training on that ship in transit than I'd got on all of the School of Infantry. And I mean, we were just training nonstop on the flight deck, everything, PT, just going over knowledge, doing shoots off the back deck. I mean, it was good stuff for being confined to a ship. I felt we definitely made the most of the time there.
Yeah, the only thing we really couldn't do is the land nav and how to basically patrol, because you don't have the space for it, obviously. But we did use a lot of that time, which we didn't use in conditioning back at Camp Pendleton, to get ready for as much as you could. But it was really hard because NCOs weren't set. You didn't have fire teams even set sometimes because people were coming in at the last minute. And I'll get into that in a second about the shortfalls. But to say hyper-focused is a good way of explaining what was going on the ship, because we really drilled down and got us some basic techniques on the ship. And I think that built confidence, repetition, faith in the guy next to you. And I believe when the time came, you never know what you're going to get into, but you had trust and faith that the guy next to you was going to be right there with you. And that was good to build that teamwork. And it was a trip, but we got a lot out of it. And as we debarked as a company from the ships to Kuwait, we had a very young company, inexperienced, 7 young officers. I think Paul Gomez at the time was 33, 34, something like that. He was our company commander, captain. We had seven staff non-commissioned officers, myself being the oldest, at 40, 41, 34 non-commissioned officers, which 25 of those were corporals, and 111 non-commissioned officers. What do you call them? Non-rates, right? Like non-rates. I don't like using a non-rate because I think non-NCO is a better word, but a company had 140. Yeah.
That's a no word nowadays.
Yeah, I know. I'm not trying to be completely correct. I just, honestly, I didn't know how to phrase it better than that. Of the 144 of its members, 125 were 25 or younger, and 60 were 21 or younger. And this next blurb from the 1st Marine Division reference is a good explanation of what the 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, specifically Bravo Company, was facing, because I got there in September of 2002 and was told to get the house in order. But when I got there, I had a roster of nearly 200 men, 210 men, but I could only muster maybe 40 for any given task. So it was kind of hard. The 1st Battalion, 4th Marines faced similar shortfalls in manpower, having returned from deployments in June of 2002. So they just got back. You had your post-deployment leave period, people coming back, leaving, posting orders, EASing, so on. They assumed the duties of 1st Marine Training and Support Battalion, providing over 200 Marines to the Support Fleet Assistance Program, the Camp Augmentation Program, and the Camp Guard. Coupled with the natural attrition of Marines reaching their end of obligated service, the battalion's on-hand troop strength was a fraction of what it once was. The Lieutenant Colonel John Mayer, who served as the division's plans officer, assumed command in August of 2002 and charged his commanders to staff to get your outfit in order. He directed and training priority as a command post exercises, small unit leadership, NBC defense readiness, humping and gas masks all the time, physical fitness and combat marksmanship. The battalion's forward and main command groups, logistics train, conducted weekly command post exercises, CPX, to refine their techniques and procedures. Select members of the staff also participated in mountain warfare training, staff planning course in December of 2002. Tactical decision games. Remember those? We used to do. I did hundreds of them as a young sergeant and staff NCO. I had a staff sergeant I worked for by the name of Staff Sergeant Herman, and he'd always come in. Yeah, the Marine Corps Gazette. Here's this week's TGG. I mean, he'd sit down and he'd have all NCOs do it. This is all fucked up. This is good. Okay, yeah. What would you do here? Tell me what you're gonna do. Game theory, right? That's what he'd have you do. He'd have you game theory this out. And expect the unexpected, right? Or try to. And it was a good kind of thing. And that's kind of what Colonel Mayer was doing with his staff, was getting them ready for anything. I think as the plans officer, I think he more or less understood what was going to happen, but he couldn't relay that to except his most confident people. And I wasn't one of those. I was just a first sergeant. So,
I mean, you can just see, looking at the key areas that he was focusing on, you could just tell that he knew what was coming down the pipe, right? NBC, physical fitness, combat marksmanship. I mean, it's like, honing in on this stuff. Like, you can just tell he knew, he saw the writing on the wall if he wasn't privy already to what was coming up, which I'm sure.
You got to remember, by this time he's pretty shabby guy. You got to remember 83 Grenada. You had Beirut bombing. You had what was it? I think there was a couple other things in the early 90s. There was the Marine Corps was involved in a lot of what do you call it? Expedition type experience. And as a Marine in that time frame, you got experience one way or another. I got it in Operation Kuwait Liberation. The liberation of Kuwait. That was my first combat experience. And by the time we got to our Operation Iraqi Freedom, the makeup of the company, the only two Marines in the company with combat experience were myself and the company gunnery sergeant, Joe Morales, and gunnery sergeant Morales. And then I believe Staff Sergeant, one of those guys may have been in Kosovo doing some cross training with the forces there and had some combat experience with them. But other than that, there really wasn't very much combat experience in the entire regiment at that time because of the rotation and the drawdown. I mean, the hard times before 2000, and then when 2001 hit, of course, the Patriot Act and the funding and the war drum started getting pounded, and then all these young men started joining, and that's your generation right there. Because of the war drums, you heard the call and you answered. And that was kind of what happened here. And I'll explain it here in a moment, that the result of the Marine Corps was we had such a drawdown and loss of experience and manpower in the early or late 90s that the buildup in the 2000s was phenomenal. It was just your generation owned that time frame right there. Does that make sense? because of the bulk of the experience, or the bulk of the work was done by your age group at that time. The 18 through 25 group did the majority of the lifting during OIF and OIF2. Okay. The 1st Marine Division was a major force of the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force involved, and it was structured as follows. Strong individuals and strong staff teams were critical enablers, and now the division's organization for combat underwent some changes as well. The CG saw habitual relationships as a conduit for speed on the battlefield and reorganizing the division into regimental combat teams with which it would fight. In combat, several 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions would join the Blue Diamond team and were planned in the RCT organizations. Excuse me. RCT-1 was Incheon, commanded by Joe Dowdy. He had recently served as MEF Future Plans Officer. There you go again, right? In addition to 1st Marines, RCT-1 included 2nd LAR Battalion, major elements of the 4th Amphibious Assault Battalion, and the 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines, which was a suburb 4th Marine Division battalion. So they called it the reserves. RCT-5, Grizzly, commanded by Joe Dunford, consisted of the 5th Marines, 1st LAR Battalion, the 2nd Tank Battalion, and then you had RCT-7 Ripper, which was commanded by Steve Hummer and included the 1st Tank Battalion and 3rd LAR Battalion. And again, we go back to the RCTs, and again, RCT-1 was addition to the 1st Marines, included RCT-1. Within the 1st Marine Regiment, you had the 1st Marines, 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, and then you had the 1st Battalion, 4th Marines. And again, for most people, they don't understand, how does the 1st Battalion, 4th Marines fall into the 1st Battalion or 1st Battalion, the 1st Marine Regiment, you know what I mean, under the 1st Marine Division. Well, and again, that falls back to history, right? When the fall of Corregidor and the fall of the 4th Marine Regiment colors in the Philippines, because that was the only regimental colors ever to fall in battle. They were not allowed to form as a regiment back in the continental United States. So their 3 active battalions are dispersed throughout the Corps' main divisions. We have one in, I think we have 2 in the 1st Marine Division and 1 in the 2nd Marine Division. You have I believe the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines over in the 2nd Marine Division, and in the 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, I think is in the 3rd Division. I'm not really sure, but I believe either that or they're with the 1st Marine Division as well, under one of the other RCTs. Okay, and then the 11th Marines, which is a artillery regiment, commanded by Mike Marletto, was integrated into the RCTs in habitual direct and general support relationships, and were elements of the division's 3rd AAV Battalion, reinforced by 2nd and 4th AAV Battalions, the 1st Combat Engineer Battalion, the 2nd Combat Engineer Battalion, the 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, and thanks to foresight and aggressive initiative, the Force Service Support Group Commander, Brigadier General Edward Usher of the FSSG, provided its own task organized representation with assigned logistics units providing direct support down to the regimental level, which means that when we split into RCTs, there's a regimental support group within each RCT. Does that make sense? It goes from SS or SSSG to RSG, or Regimental Support Group. So they go down into subunits, just like you would do with a company, platoon, squad, fire team, so on. So they can support the entire division across the spectrum and move from one RCT to the next as needed. Does that make sense? As an independent unit within each RCT. They can be attached, detached. Okay, on 17 and 18 March, we're setting the stage again. President Bush issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Saddam Hussein. The division forward CP displaces and takes control. The division is ordered into its dispersal areas to avoid being targeted by missile strikes. During the movement, the division does a relief in place in Kuwait with Kuwait land forces. The division main CP moves into a battle position. This is where we start our story, from the ship to the shore. 18 March, you'll see the references to the Thomas Guide. It tells you the page reference that if you have one of these, you can still go back and mark it and find the grid reference. You'll see the date time group, 18 being the day, the 1300 being the time, Zulu being the time zone, March being the month, and 03 being the year. So daytime group. And a grid, you'll see the grid identifier, QT, within each 100 grids, 1,000-yard grids. It has to change over. You have to identify how you're changing boundaries from one map to another or from one grid zone to another. So you use identifiers, and for that location, it was the grid was located at a Quebec Tango 490-800, and that was called L Landing Zone Coyote, and that was our debarkation day of 18 March. And I got off the ship at 1300. I was the last flight out from the company, and we showed from Navy shipping via CH-43s and 46s into the LZ. And with a short hump, it was only about 1,000 meters. So with everything, we landed in the Landing Support Area 1, which is for RCT-1, located at, again, another grid. Division staging area Matilda in area 4K east of the LZ. And again, my note, back in Kuwait. Ray. 18 March at 1330. Finally reached the LSA. Bravo Company starts matching up with its units. 3rd Platoon. These are our attachments here. 3rd Platoon, Bravo Company, 1st AAV. We had 1 Marine officer, 38 Marine enlisted, and 1 Navy enlisted. We had scout snipers from the 1st Battalion, 4th Marine Headquarters Company, 4 Marine enlisted and 1 Navy enlisted. A Javelin section from Weapons Company, 1-4, with 5 Marine enlisted. The Explosive Ordnance Disposal section from 1st Marine Division with 2 Marine enlisted. The 1st Marine Regiment Engineers, they drove an ACE, which is a small tractored bulldozer, armored bulldozer. I had 2 Marine enlisted. We had the 1st Marine Regiment Combat Engineers with 10 Marine enlisted. And then with Bravo Company, we got off the ship with 7 Marine officers, 154 Marine enlisted, and 8 Navy enlisted. And so our total strength, when we moved out on our tracks, we had 8 Marine officers, 214 Marine enlisted, and 10 Navy enlisted. And again, how do I know this? Because I had the Alpha roster, and I was responsible for getting the counts on every movement. So this became a routine. And again, it may seem like detail, but that's what we had. And again, 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, which went under the call sign Pale Rider, starts its movement north to regimental combat team dispersal areas, passing checkpoints along the way, 1A, 2A, 3A. Along the way, one of our section tracks breaks down. And again, we had problems with tracks all along the way, but these guys were awesome the way they got things done. We had good support. And again, when we start moving this movement north, remember, we get off, and within 2 hours, we're already matching up on AAVs, and we're starting our move. Matter of fact, that picture that Lucian Reed took, and I did a painting of it, it's over my corner, was that first movement. We were up on the tracks, and that look I'm giving Staff Sergeant from Weapons Platoon, Staff Sergeant Lee. I'm giving that look to Staff Sergeant Lee. He's like, hurry the fuck up, because you're taking too goddamn long. Anyways, it took from 18th, 19th, 20th. And we didn't cross the line of departure until the 21st. So we did a slow, sneaky track up there into our lanes. Man, we thought we had time to do it, but time got compressed on us, so we had to jump off a little sooner than expected. And we'll get into that. and we arrive at at 15:10 on the 18th at CP Lightning. We remained there for the evening, and again, we just kind of did our herringbones and bivouacked, put out our watch, checked light discipline, and started hammering down on folks that didn't learn the right way the first time. So I mean, that's kind of, it sounds brutal, but that's what you got to do. You got to wake these guys up sometimes, and hey, well, when they see the first rockets going off, then they start paying attention, and that's, until that time, you got to keep them focused. In the opening gambit, the 1st Marine Division had worked hard with the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing to craft and detail a plan of the first 4 days of the fight. Dubbed the opening gambit, the operation was expected to have the division cross the Euphrates River within 96 hours. The plan called for the takedown of the enemy's reconnaissance on Saffron Hill, followed by the 3rd Marine Aircraft Aviation and the 11th Marine Service prep fires of the artillery of the 3rd Corps and the 51st Mechanized Division of the Iraqi Guard. RCT-7 Ripper would be clear the town of Saffron en route to seize the critical pump station at Zabar, and then destroying the 51st Division. RCT-5 Grizzly would sweep into the south Ramallah oil fields from the west, seizing the critical gas separation plants and destroying the defenders there. They would also attack along the Alamo Bridge in the Ramallah oil fields and set up blocking positions. RCT-1 Inchon and the reconnaissance battalion Godfather would sweep west, screening the division's northern flank and prepping the way to the Euphrates bridges. The 1st Marine Division would turn the battle space over to the 1st UK Armored Division with 48 hours and commencing the attack. The division executed the plan on the accelerated timetable, attacking 232 kilometers and crossing major elements over the Euphrates rivers in under 72 hours. So, and again, because we got forced into a compressed timeline, things got moved up on us. Once we did start moving, they moved fast. Our short movement on the 19th, we started moving around noon. We halted for the evening. So it was a short movement, probably not even an hour, and we ended up stopping. 19, 20 March, and the night of 20 March, U.S. launches TLAMs and strategic targets in Baghdad. Iraqis returned with Scuds and Frogs, and seersuckers fired at U.S. bases in Kuwait. The 20th at 1000 movement continues, staging areas eventually getting each combat team into attack positions and each of its assigned lanes. RCT-1 plus order of battle will be LAR minus, tank battalion minus, Cat 1-4 A and B, followed by 3-1-1-4 and 223, trailed by CSSD. And again, 11th Marines was in there somewhere. After indications that the Iraqis are beginning to destroy the oil infrastructure again, like they did in 1991, we lived for 30 days under the oil wells, which I talked about earlier, that earlier interview that didn't go so well, but they destroyed their own infrastructure just to prevent us from obtaining it. That's how evil these people are. Grizzly is ordered to move 9.5 hours early. They crossed the LD in short notice at 17:30, just before nightfall, and quickly to secure and prevent further destruction of the southern Ramallah gas pumping stations. They also blocked the escape of a reinforcement of the 51st Mechanized Division. So it's on. On the 20th at 2200, short movement arrived, slow infiltration in the lanes. We continue north till reaching Route Blue. Start movement west, and this is where we start moving. Remember, in the back of the tracks, you're standing up, and we're not on the roads at this point. We're going over, improved roads. They're still pretty bumpy, and you're standing up in the back of this track. By that time, my back's already starting to hurt. We've only been there 2 days. My back's starting to hurt from all the gear we're carrying. Anyways, that's just grunt. Deal with it. Short movement arrive, slow infiltration lanes, continue north. Route Blue, we start movement west. This is from division records. On 20 and 21 March, Saffron Hill struck by air repeatedly prior to division's LD in order to destroy observers atop the hill. And on 21 March at 21:05, Force Recon secures and remains on Saffron Hill and assures no observers remain. No survivors. And then on 21 March at just after midnight, continue west on Route Blue, turn north, again passing Route Green, turning west again. I think this is where, when we turn west again, this is where we hit the hard paved road. So we're starting to move again. So on that night after hitting that hard paved road, we turn west and halt for final refueling and arming. We get into MOP 2. And again, we weren't into MOP gear at that point, but we ended up getting into MOP gear. Again, MOP 2, you've got your tops and bottoms on. You don't have your boots out on, but you got your mask on your body. You're not wearing it, but you're wearing the outer garment, and gloves and boots are still stowed away, and mask is worn around the waist. All right, we reach on 21 March at 03. The remainder of the division forces, assault forces, cross the LD. Ripper leads to 1st Tank Battalion, leads with the 1st Tank Battalion and 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines, which swing wide around Saffron Hill to flank a suspected Republican Guard tank unit. The remainder of the RCT attacks up Highway 80 as planned, and RCT 7 attacks to secure the pumping station complex at, I can't remember what the name again. I just said it earlier. And destroyed by the 51st Mechanized Division. At 2100, or I should say on the 21st at 06, so the following morning, we reached lane 1 and 2 clicks south of the line of departure. So we haven't even crossed the line yet, and RCT 7's already heading, which they are north of us, are already starting to rip it up. As part of the 15th MUSOC, 2-1 attacks to secure the port of Qusar, which is further up the Gulf, to take that port. I haven't done much research on what 2-1 did, but I imagine it wasn't a cakewalk. 21 on the 21st at 07, we crossed the line of departure and phase line Florida into the Iraqi border. And on the 21st 08, Bravo Company crosses along breach lane 1. Division objective was the Jabal Sanam airfield, the Az-Zabar airfield, and the massive oil complex to the south and north from phase line Florida to Jim along the 65 northern. It was a huge complex. There were probably about 25 or 30 clicks each way. RCT-1 was in lanes furthest west, pushing the division's left flank, bypassing Basra and moving to Fade on Al Qut, drawing Republican Guard armor, then moved to push on to Baghdad, bypassing division objectives. And again, the main division objectives were reached by RCT 7 and 5, where RCT 1 had a specific objective. It looks like we were going to push to Al Qut to be a feint, to draw the armor away from RCT 5 and 7. And I think we get into that pretty good. Okay, on the 09, column halts in defensive positions, traveling in a last track tail end Charlie, start movement once again, all units in place. And again, I was usually with either the track commander, who was tail end Charlie, or the XO. So I was either riding with him or the XO. And I know Company Gunny had his Humvee. I had the supply Humvee, or the admin, and the CO had a Humvee. So I would go back and forth between the Humvee and the tracks throughout this entire process. Or as we crossed the line of departure, the Humvees were back with the regimental support group. So they would catch up to us as we crossed. And again, slow state and column at 1200. We passed certain phase lines, Adam, Andy, traveling west. We passed another oil field, the Azonak, on the 1500, located northwest, crossing grid zone. We changed from GU to PU, passing phase line Jim and phase line Art. And that was the kind of stuff I had to keep track of, just so, because if you need a medevac, you want to send a medevac, 100 clicks off. You know what I mean? By using the wrong identifier. So you had to keep track of that kind of stuff. 21 March, 1st Recon Battalion screens the division's northern flank to ensure no counterattacking force crosses the Humar marshes, bridges. RCT-1 clears Highway 1 and 8 to the edge of the division zone. Both forces observe hundreds of unarmed deserters in civilian clothes streaming to the west. And again, on 21 March, again, we've only been across the line of departure now for not even a full day yet. RCT-1 deploys along major paved road, Highway 8, moving due west, with 3-1 to the north and 1-4 to the south in a sweeping position. So if you can picture a Highway 8, 2 lanes, 2 wide lanes on each side, and then you have one battalion moving on one side, one on the other, just moving as fast as we can or as quickly as we can, following LAR and the CAT units. So that's kind of the way we were moving forward. Let's see here. On 2350 on the 21st, we halt blocking positions with 3-1 to the north, remaining in this area for 30 hours, refuel and rearm, expecting regiment from northwest in coming days. I mean, we were expecting the armor threat to take down and try to block us from crossing some of the bridges. And on 21 March, RCT-7 destroys the 41st Armored Brigade and the 31st and 32nd Mechanized Brigades of the 51st Division in the vicinity of Azabar. RCT-7 continues to attack north and east, establishing blocking positions across the Shat al-Basra, denying Iraqi forces the opportunity to counterattack into 1st Marine Division zones. In the process, 1-7 secures Zabar's pumping station complex, coined the crown jewel, thereby safeguarding this key oil node in southeastern Iraq. So you got to take care of your investors first, right? 22 March, 1st Marine Division completes relief in place with 1st UK Armored Division. 1st Marine Division refuels and moves west, prepared to cross the Euphrates River. On 23 March, we start movement to RCT-1 assembly area. And again, we're not even, as we dispersed, we were beginning our movement again. RCT is established an assembly area. We start to arrange our forces in order and to move out. So you have your order of battle assembled, and then we start to move out. On that day, on the 23rd, and I wrote this in here because we're about to experience, as we move north, greater changes in weather. When we moved out that morning, it was 83 degrees, sunny, and high clouds as we passed the phase line. And again, I make a note of that because within, I think, 48 hours, we're in a haboo that is historic. Almost you can't see people die. It's so bad. It's just phenomenal. On the 23rd at 08, as we arrive at the assembly area, movement continues without stop. At the assembly area, we pass Alpha Battery 111, and I got a yell out from the battery commander, Captain Jason Fry. He was a gun platoon commander in the artillery, Tango 511. When I was an operations chief, I felt in better spirits after seeing him. Days later, Captain Fry's vehicle was hit by a RPG on his side. He survived but lost his right arm. I found out later before crossing Diyala, and that kind of hit me hard because I saw the battery going into firing positions earlier that day before we crossed, and I had a chance to catch up, and it wasn't good news. Moving steady north on the 23rd. Okay, again from the division notes, on the 23rd, 3rd LAR screening the division's front is ambushed by hundreds of Fedayeen fighters with tanks, RPGs, mortars, and machine guns. The Wolf Pack crushes these paramilitary fighters in their first encounter with the 1st Marine Division and the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing. And I remember all this time, as you look forward, as we're heading down the road, you could see the fires, you could see the smoke, you could hear the fighting going on kilometers and kilometers ahead. And as you just keep grinding and grinding forward, and you knew sooner or later, 3-1 moves back, 1-4 takes the lead, so on and so forth. And as you'll see later on, as RCT-1 crosses the Euphrates, we more or less we're on our own at that point, and we we have to rely on each battalion as we do the shuffle through up to El Kut. Okay, we do on the evening or the afternoon of the 23rd, long halt and herringbone, start moving again while firing in north is heavy. We witnessed Cobras making a lot of runs. On the 23rd, 1st Marine Division attacks up the unfinished Highway 1, surprising Iraqis and posing a new threat to Baghdad from the south. And again, you remember RCT-1 did the probing south of Baghdad, while we went through the east of Baghdad. On the 23rd at noon, moving fast now, we pass Manzal Hanja, still on Route 8, heading west. Cobra attacks experienced long stops during evening with slow movements over the next 24 hours. This is at 21 or 12:15. Experienced long stops, slow movements in the next 24 hours. I moved from tracks, platoon commanders, AAV, to the Humvee on halt, able to move along column as needed. And again, that was a good thing to check on people. And also, I had to get information, make sure everything's okay, no injuries, everybody's accounted for, no missing gear, so on and so forth. 23 and 24 March, the division conducts the forward passage line with Task Force Tarawa. The lead division elements cross the Euphrates River at 06:55. You remember Task Force Tarawa? That's where, IF2, one of the first sergeants in the first sergeant of Charlie Company was Justin Leahy, and he was part of Task Force Tarawa. He ended up getting a Navy Cross during that engagement that they had the night before our relief in place.
They're the ones that lost the track, right?
That's correct. That's correct. And he was the one that went and found the Marine that was missing. The Iraqis had buried him, and they led him to the grave. The lead element of the division crossed the Euphrates River and continued to attack north along the unfinished highway. RCT 5 and 7 and supporting elements slowly passed through the hourglass choke point at the bridge. That's what made this such an important 48 hours, because to get across the Euphrates, it was a very narrow space to fit so many large units through. So it was a choke point, and it was a weakness point. So if the Iraqis had been able to establish enough supporting arms and resistance, it would have been, it could have been turned out a whole lot different than it did. But through sheer speed and surprise and audacity, I think we caught a lot of them by surprise. And that's exactly, we just kept moving at a certain point. Okay, now we're at the 24th at 13:20 March. Column is moving north slowly. Heavy fire up ahead as the RCT nears Nasiriyah and the Jaz Azari Bridge, which spans the Euphrates River. During a short halt, we get to watch the artillery battery in place and start fire missions in under 2 minutes, which was impressive. And I made a note of that because I used to teach artillery at Fort Sill as a gunnery instructor, both automated and manual. And I knew the standards for artillery, and for immediate suppression fire in under 2 minutes, that was pretty impressive, especially in combat conditions with the heavy load. Those cannoneers did a fantastic job. All firing towards where we were going. All areas show evidence of airstrikes and M1 firing. You can find the shells and the results of their firing all over the place, buildings, vehicles. Weather darkening fast, no moon. NVGs had 7 Bravos and laser aiming the PQs on, and we could see small arms ahead, incoming and outgoing. On the Thomas Guide, page 8, we changed pages now. On 24th of March at 22:30, the company passed a destroyed T-55. Column is picking up speed, and I am in the passenger seat, and Lance Corporal Chipperez driving on a high-back, soft-skinned Humvee with Lance Corporal Welch and PFC Langlis in the back as we enter the Nasiriyah and the Black and Night tucked in between armored vehicles and running gunfights. And that's what it really was. I mean, watching this through the NGVs going between NGVs, NV. Slow down. Again, it was hard to describe the way it felt, because it was, and again, this is a soft-skinned Humvee. Watching all this fire, we didn't get a lot of fire, but whatever they did fire got got suppressed immediately. I mean, it wasn't even competition, because you got to remember, I think RCT-5 had already been through there an hour or two before that, so we weren't the first ones to cross, but it was still a lot going on. At 2300, changing routes from 8 west to 7 north, just before crossing the Euphrates River at the Algerie Bridge, which is about 800 meters long. All AAV units at full sprint. We dash in between, but staying on the port side of the last 2 tracks of Bravo Company. The ACE and EOD vehicles crossed in the middle of the column. As we cross the bridge using NVGs watching tracks, we see laser detonators and PEQ2s light up 360. Most incoming was ineffective from the northeast, and I remember that. They took destructive counterfire from the tracks passing in front of us. 25 March, RCT-1 attacks through a 4-kilometer stretch of road through Fedayeen territory and Nasiriyah. The door closes behind us as RCT-1 passes through Nasiriyah, as we embark on what we call as a 100-mile gunfight through the Mesopotamian mud. This is basically us, RCT-1, with its attached units, doing a sprint from Nasiriyah up to Al-Qut. Remember, we were to draw armored forces from Baghdad down into Al-Qut, so we can attack the southern portion of Baghdad without the armored interference. And then we were going to move from Al-Qut back into the assault on Baghdad. And that's kind of what happened after Nasiriyah. The door closed on us. They moved out of Nasiriyah. Remember, they had a big fight in Nasiriyah after that too, not just before, but after. 5th Marines got into some serious fighting in Nasiriyah, and then later on down the road in Baghdad as well. So they took a brunt of the fighting to get us through the door. And once we got through the door, we were on a sprint. And we crossed the canal bridge at Rawan and continued north, reaching Route 16 west back to 7 north. We passed a destroyed ZU-23, still on fire. ZSU-23. I left the S out. On the 24th and 25th, the mother of all sandstorms hits the division. This is where we went from 85 degrees on the 22nd or the 21st and sunny. Now the mother of all sandstorm hits the division. The conditions worsens until visibility is 0. Convoys halt as drivers can no longer see the road. Torrential rain follows the blowing dust, leaving every Marine vehicle and piece of equipment covered in mud. 5 Marines are killed during accidents caused by the storm. And that, I think that's in everybody's memory. They remember, if they don't remember anything, they remember that storm. That was nasty.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, wasn't an Abrams tank one of the ones that
flipped upside down into a canal? Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
All 3 of them died. I think that's where 3 of the deaths came from. And then on the 25th at 0320, passed another destroyed ZU-23, continuing the route north. See the destroyed bus at that grid, estimated 15 KIA, a destroyed truck, estimated 7 KIA, a destroyed car, 3 casualties, including an 8-year-old, and a destroyed truck, estimated 1 KIA. Fine flattened body on the road, ran over by traffic during the chaos. It's a very surreal environment. Night vision, watching the weapon, bouncing on this soft plastic of this Humvee. Some vivid memories. And of course, Chipper's doing the same. We'll try to drive in a very nasty weather. That was really bad. On 25 March, the 2nd LAR Battalion ambushes an Iraqi counterattack force. That was that forces we were expecting to come down the regiment. At Nasiriyah, that's that fight they got into. Barbarian reports 100 of Fedayeen, Republican Guard, and Republican Army fighters destroyed. On the 25th at 06, as we're moving down the road, RPG team takes. Let me get a drink here, so I'm getting kind of harsh. Good timing. All right, this is probably one of the first real, unload, attack the building kind of combat the company had seen at this point. Before it was all return fire from tracks or sporadic incoming fire, or not necessarily aimed at them specifically. It wasn't personal. This is one of the first experiences I remember that as we were heading down this morning, and I made note of it because what we see is the first reactions of all that training we really went into and how it paid off. We didn't lose anybody, but yet we got the job done. We suppressed it, and we moved on. On the 06 in the morning, this is early, RPG team takes an aim at first platoon and misses, which they missed one of the tracks. I think it either fell short or went between the tracks, which disembarked the AVs and swept the area. Fire was focused on one house. An assaultman, which is an 351, fired a small rocket in the wall facing the highway. Fire stops as the team clears the house, and I witness. And I remember this vividly because going up there and I'm seeing the smoke clear from this wall. The Marines go in, and you hear the yelling and everything else. And one of the Marines pops out, and then here comes this little, the family of 8 slowly starts to come out. First the small girl of 6 or 7 without arms out, not injured but really dusty. And then I saw a girl or a 10-year-old with clothes ripped and torn from the blast but not hurt. And then the mother carrying 2 children, and then the father holding 2 children. It was hard to believe that they all survived that. And there was nobody dead inside. So, but they obviously hadn't fired the RPG. So, I hear some more firing on the other side of the building, kind of a ways off. So I run to the other side and I see our Corporal Begay, which was an 0351. He had a rocket ready to fire position. And another Marine about 20 feet away behind a small thin palm, and he's firing off into a building that's off maybe about 150, maybe 200 meters away. And I had to stop and ask him, hey, because Begay's starting to look over his shoulder like, hey, his back, I got a clear back blast. He's checking his area, right? He's ready. He's ready to let one loose. And I told him to hold off. And so I asked the other Marine, I didn't know who that was. I don't remember who it was. I asked him, what are you firing at? And he said, I saw 2 guys run behind that building over there, or run near that building over there. I said, did they go in the building or out of the building behind in the field? He was like, I can't tell. I said, well, hold off for now. Because after just seeing that family just walk out of that building after a rocket hit, it's like, that's all we need in the news, man, is crap like that. So, I told him to hold off, let's see. And then the XO started calling everybody to get rounded back up on the tracks. So those 2 went, and I think it was Langlis and me stayed there for about another couple minutes, and we didn't see any movement, didn't hear any other movement, no other fire. So we just faded back to the vehicles and got out of there. But we never did see where the rocket came from. That was probably the rocket team, and he was trying to hit him. But who knows? I didn't have a clear shot at that building, and we were being rounded up. Remember what our mission was. It wasn't to stop and delay and bog things down. It was to keep moving. Remember, we're on the other side of Euphrates at this point. We've got a division. We're cut off from the rest of the division. We need to keep moving. Anyway, so let's see here. He couldn't, so I told him I'd get back. We started moving north, passing another destroyed bus, estimated KIA, just the driver. A gas alarm goes off around 07. We go to MOP 3 with false alarm. MOP 3 is when you put the gas mask on. MOP 4 is when you put the gloves and boots on. So you got the outer garments on, and then now you're wearing your mask. So we had to go into mask for a little bit until they explained it was a false alarm. So we got out of that, and you'll see that everybody was a little pissed off at that. I remember that. I was too, because that's all we knew was this kind of bullshit going on. It's bad enough doing this other stuff, but playing with chemical weapons is, you see the results now, right? The bioweapons. Okay, so we got out of that. We see another destroyed ZSU 23-1. And again, I thought I had a picture of one of those. Destroyed at 23 at that grid with a crew of 1 KIA and 8 EPWs moving past Garef. On 25 March, RCT-1 attacks through Al Gharef, surprising the Battalion with an unplanned flank attack by 1st Recon. 111 supports attack with direct fire as well as indirect fire. And you know the difference, being an artillery now, that the difference between direct and indirect fires. So when an artillery gets into direct fire, you're basically acting like a tank. You're a tank gun. So you're aiming, you're in line of sight. 25 March at 1000, moving north, next town of Al-Shatra. Ahead, hearing firefights, still 6 Ks away. Battalion that is active with reports. 25 March at 11:40, so now another hour and 40 minutes later. We're still pushing towards Al-Shatra, so we haven't moved that a few clicks. We take small arms, burst, direct our vehicle. Remember, we're still in a soft skin Humvee going down the road this is farm country where you got palm trees on the sides of the roads. It's kind of like where I live right now in Yuma. If you think about it, between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers, you have this rich farmland. It's kind of like it is down here in Arizona, southern Arizona.
I've got a picture of that, and I'll put it up for the final version of this so that people can see how lush and vegetated it is.
So when we take smaller fires or RPG fires, they wouldn't necessarily come from the houses. They would come from between the houses, where the palm lines were or the field lines were, where the brush would grow up. So you're an expert in camouflage, and you know how the small arm tactics works. They take the best advantage shot they can get. If it didn't work, they'd fade away. And this is a good example of that when we're pushing there, and we take a burst directly at our vehicle, and they didn't hit us. It went in front of us, and it really pissed Chipperez off. And he got out. He stopped the vehicle. I remember this. We're still moving. All the tracks going by, and you see a couple of heads starting to stop at Herringbone because they saw the fire. You see sporadic fire going back, but Chipperez was so pissed he got out and just started walking over there, started shooting away. I'm like, God damn, I don't know why that pissed him off so much, but that pissed him off. Anyway, so one of the tracks took care of it, but then we got back into moving. He was pissed. Yeah, I think it was they suppressed the fire with 50 cal until we moved on. I call that one Chip's firefight. I got that in my notes. I still laugh at that one because he was good for keeping me in good spirits. At noon on the 25th, we enter the outskirts of Al-Shatra. This is kind of a long story here, and I'll keep it simple. On the outskirts of Al-Shatra, heavy resistance northeast of the city, fading, and Cobras and LAR doing their work. They're suppressing the enemy. Herringbone in large flat area outside of the town. Time to eat, refuel, and rearm. I moved back to the AAV, so I moved back to the track commander's AAV. And while eating my MRE, I had my radio and rifle on the top of my, where the hatch is open on top of the AAV. I had my radios in my day pack because I had it all corded out. So I had unhooked the radio and my squad radio. And so this is the first time in a few days I had a chance to take all that shit off and sit down. And I started to do one of the MRE packs, the chemical packs, and so I could eat. My radio's up there, and I hear firing from our track. I was like, bam, bam, right in front of me. And I look up, and it's our senior corpsman. Remember, senior corpsmen don't carry rifles. They only have a 9mm. He's up there firing my rifle, bam, out into the field somewhere. I said, what are you firing at? Oh, there's people out there. Are they armed? I don't know. Then don't fire at them. And so he put my weapon down. It's like, oh, you idiot. Okay, actually, a couple minutes later, I hear a couple more shots. And then I started hearing chatter up on the radio. So I get up, and it turns out a situation where we're so close to town, there was a little wadi, little muddy area between the town and that dry area where we were it was just a big clearing. And you had these like multi-story buildings over there. That was the edge of the town for us. And a woman was walking out across that wadi towards one of the platoons, and she was carrying some bags. And the story I was told after I did the investigation, what I concluded was one of the platoon, remember, everybody's eating, refueling, rearming, but we still have to post watches, right? One of the overwatches fired some warning shots to stop her from going forward. And another platoon, again, a couple hundred meters away, doesn't know the situation. They start firing. They just lit her up. So she was done. And we got there. Our company XO, company Gunny had come up, and she was dead. She was carrying some moldy fruit. I think she was hoping to trade some MREs or some food or clean water for the kids. And I always remember that feeling is like, a grandmother risking it all. Um, yeah. I remember that. That wasn't a good day. There was a lot of ups and downs that day. So we left. We left there and we're on the move again at 14:30. We passed the city of Al Nazir, which they had a Ba'ath Party headquarters, which is like he had an authoritarian regime, but he also had their super extreme party members. That's what the Ba'ath Party was. Mood of the company changed after the last 24 hours. Innocents lost. I put us and them. And again, this is out of my notes. I thought last few days was, that was a hard morning, a hard afternoon, and a tough lesson to learn about fire discipline and communications. Could have been handled differently, but it wasn't. It was just one of those tragedies. Once the dogs are unleashed, you don't know who's going to get bit. All right, on the 1800 on the 25th, we're passing the city of Al-Rafah. We're in MVGs grinding north. 2 Marines join us, Captain Parkinson and Sergeant Gray from Charlie, Company 1-4, and we'll detach back when we halt. 2 EOD Marines, Staff Sergeant Colton and Nelson, dropped to 1st FSSG. So they departed us and went back over to FSSG. And then on the 26th through the 30th, from the division notes, the division conducts security operations along Highway 1, destroying Fedayeen holdouts and setting conditions for stabilization in the south. So south of Highway 1 was a key point because it's been secured. Those were those key oil fields and oil processing pumps. So now they're going to start stabilization of that area, which means they're going to start bringing in contractors and security forces and blah, 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 blah. So however you want to put that. Again, that's not our job. That's, we were just the tip of the spear, that kind of thing. On 26 March at 14:30, this we're past Kalatsukar. Some resistance, but no injuries so far. Column stops at regimental resupply point. And Cap Gomez, Lieutenant Shaw, they briefed the platoon commanders, or myself, the company gunny, on the mission of the 27th and 28th, which the battalion will assault and occupy the intersections of 7 North and 17 West. Company to move 20K east along 17 and establish blocking positions. Alpha and Charlie will do the same in different routes. So what we're doing was the RCT was coming up, taking this key intersection. 1-4 was to establish blocking positions for the regiment, which means Bravo went this way, Alpha went that way, Charlie went that way, and they set up blocking positions down different routes, 20 clicks out, 10 clicks out, 15 clicks out, to provide enough warning and security for the rest of the regiment while it halted there at that intersection. And again, on the 26th and 28th of March, the rest of the division, RCT 5 and division fire suppress remaining Fedayeen and regime holdouts, stronghold at Diwania. Local populace aid the Marines in ridding the city of the Fedayeen. Again, that's a good point to make. That remember the Iraqi people weren't our enemy, just the forces of that supported Saddam Hussein. And again, this is what we were fed. They wanted the liberation, get rid of Saddam as much as the governments did around the world, or the government around the world. And again, on 26 March, RCT-1 uses strong point tactics learned at Nasiriyah to fight its way up Highway 7 through Ashatra, Nasra, Rafah, and Kalatsukar. And again, remember how we'd block the southern portion of the city. We'd go through, assault through the city, block the northern portion, and then start funneling the rest of the RCT through the city until the northern portion was the last blocking position. Does that make sense? block the southern, move through, block the northern, move the rest of the regiment through, release the northern, and you're moving north. There's no security on that town. So once you got your FSSG support units through and you're already through, you're moving again. So it would go from town to town to town to town like that. Movement to movement to movement. RCT 5 rooms, we received, we reached a blocking position at 1600 on the 27th. I left something out, did I? Yeah. 27 March, 1st Recon Battalion secures Kalatsakar airfield while RCT 1 attacks all the way to junctions Route 7 and 17. This attack fixes the Baghdad Republican Guard Division in Al-Qut and blocks the 10th Armored Division in El Amra. And Bravo Company reaches the first blocking position, Pale Rider located nearby. So it means we went down Route, I think it's 17 west, and then part of the command element came with us from Pale Rider. So he's probably looking at something up there. 27 March, RCT 5 resumes the attack up Highway 1 and seizes the Huntush airfield following the intense firefight. The division is ordered to withdraw from the airfield and conduct security along the vulnerable lines of communications, means maintaining the roads. Awake in the very cold area east of Route 7 and 17, Stand 2 was done poorly by command element. Remember, this is 10 days. We've only been in country 10 days at this point. Awake in cold area east of 7 and 17. Now remember how it was 86 and sunny. Now we're down in the cold 30s and 40s. Stand 2 was done poorly by headquarters element of the company, and the remainder of the company was too loud, secured by gear, and made hot tea for the first time in Iraq. After my tea, Captain Gomez briefed us on today's mission. Each platoon must approve the defense sectors of fire on expected long hauls and give fire plans to Lieutenant Cap. I remember anytime we stopped more than 24 hours, we'd have to have fire plans, or there's actually more than just a couple hours. You'd have to do your sectors of fire. Remember as a machine gunner, how many times you did that? Have to stake everything out and then get your fire plan. So your squad leader can get it together and get it into the Lieutenant Cap so he could put it in for the night. So if we were probed or attacked, he'd have some kind of location of forces known. Okay, First Lieutenant Shaw, Gunny Morales, and I had a chance to talk briefly about some of the things that had occurred in the last few days. Remember, this was the last 2 days have been a lot of firefights after we got through Nasiriyah, right? Because we were on our own after that, and so we were taking the brunt of it. Before that, RCT 5 and 7, LAR and were more or less in front of us until we crossed Nasiriyah. Then RCT 1 was by itself, and they continued on to southern Baghdad. So we talked about what we'd seen, and we'd all agree we did some things really good and some things bad. And Captain Gomez says he'll walk around, talk to squads, and see what's going on. And I did notice that the fire discipline had gotten better and more accurate. I mean, people just weren't popping shots off if that woman was killed in Ashatra. I think that woke a lot of people up about, hey, this ain't no joke. You know, this ain't no game anymore. It never was, but it takes certain things to wake people up. And then you also start to see who you can rely on and can't rely on. And but the maturity happens over time. Okay, we're walked over to turn in the morning report. You'll find this funny as a first start. Walked over to turn in the morning report of Lieutenant Astor, who was the battalion adjutant. I was an hour and a half late, and he was not happy, especially after having to change my count. Lance Corporal Howard had broke his right hand, which was his firing hand, on a hatch cover from the AAV, fell on it and basically crushed his hand. So we transferred him. He had to be out of there. He was crying because he didn't want to leave. But I couldn't keep him with that much pain. It just wouldn't have been fair to him and everybody else. Back in the company, we moved east again. Reached second blocking position. Company deploys for short time, then departs on 17 back into blocking positions, the original ones. Positions set, and we stay in place for the next 72 hours. On the 29th of March, 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines of RCT 7 and 223 of RCT 1 link up on Highway 17, opening a supply route to RCT 1 and allowing cross-compartment movement between two attack corridors. So you had RCTs 5 and 7 along the south. Remember, RCT 5 was kind of got held back at Nasiriyah, so now you got 7 moving forward. We moved up after Nasiriyah to go towards Al Qut, and now after 3 days, 4 days, they found a route in between the two corridors, so now we can cross move it with the supplies, so we don't have to go through Nasiriyah anymore. So that's basically what was going on. Artillery barrage, 3-1 has been taking mortar and artillery fire. Bravo is to move back to Route 7 on the 31st. Now, 3-1 was taking fire, but they were located at Route 7. So that area had been getting probed in mortar and artillery fire for some time during those 3 days. And 3-1 we were about to go relieve 3-1 in place. Attack at Al Qut. Okay, this is the running the seam. Once across the Euphrates, the division would strike north on 2 axes. The main effort, RCT 5 followed by RCT 7, would attack up the unfinished Highway 1, feint, and attack straight into Baghdad from the south. RCT 1 would conduct a supporting attack up Highway 7 along the Tigris River. RCT 1's attack would fix the Baghdad Republican Division in Al Qut, while RCT 5 and 7 would turn to the northeast and seize the Tigris River Bridge at Numaniyah. This would allow the division to take advantage of the seam and the enemy's defenses and isolate the Baghdad Republican Guard division from the rest of the Republican Guard. Once across the Tigris, the division would have effectively cut off the 6 regular army divisions and the Baghdad Republican Guard division that made up the southern Iraqi defenses. The division accomplished the mission through a raging sandstorm, successfully attacking an additional 200 kilometers and liberating numerous towns from Fedayeen paramilitary fighters along the way. On the 31st, this is back to the company. We moved north on Highway 7, on Route 7 north, pushed towards Al Hay. We passed Weapons Company 81 mortars firing missions north, passed battery from 111 firing north, and company seizes company objective 1. On the 31st of March, 3-1 isolates Ashatra and destroys the Ba'ath Party headquarters or facilities. A search for a missing Marine from Task Force Tarma ends up with the discovery of his grave. I think that was Leahy that went back and they found him, I think. Moving up Route 7 and relieving 3-1 in place. After dark, returning from battalion visit with Captain Gomez. I see the ace engineers. I remember we had the armored bulldozer, which really came in good, especially for long hauls because you could make firing positions, especially for machine guns. They don't need to dig in the hard ground, or at times after that storm, it was extremely wet. So I was actually surprised when we got back. He had made revetments, and the AAVs were parked in them, and there were some firing positions for some of the machine guns, and the Marines had holes. As I climbed to the hood of the Humvee, and again, this is dark now. It's kind of cold out and windy. I was climbing on the hood of the Humvee to get my bag out. I hear a very loud, Ali Akbar, Allah Akbar, right? You've heard it before, I'm sure. Heard it really loud, and then a single round go off, which passed, as I'm reaching for my bag. The voice I heard was only about maybe 75 meters off. It wasn't very far. And that bullet went between me and my bag as I'm lifting my hands up. And I realized instantly what it was. As soon as I heard Ali Akbar, I got on edge. And then the round passed between me and the vehicle, and I just dropped off the hood and rolled off. And when I hit the ground, I start to see the flashes, not from the rifle, but a 240 Golf head went off, firing at the guy who fired at me. It was a short burst. I don't know if he had it. He must have seen him after that because I didn't hear anything else. But at the same time, I see flashes off about 6-7 clicks away. And I had seen that before, being a Desert Storm. Those are rockets. We're being fired rockets at us, right? Because you can see them launching out of the Katysh. So I start to run towards one of the berms, and I hop in because the headquarters guys were right there. I jump in on top of Welsh in his hole. He's like, "What the fuck, First Sergeant? You said you never get in the fucking hole." I said, I wouldn't get in a hole unless it's big stuff. And just them, they see the rockets flying overhead, and you hear Chipper as in Langley, so they're giggling as it hits the battalion, the battalion CP area about a click behind us. So these rockets are impacted back there. I don't think it hit anything, But these guys are over there laughing like, I don't know if they knew what just happened, but for me, it was like, oh fuck, that's all I did. I was cold and tired and just wanted to rest. So I just stayed in that hole for the rest of the night with Welch until I got up the next morning. I know I didn't stay in the hole, but I remember having to get back on the radio after that, and then went back to the hole. But Captain Gomez, who was on the radio for most of the night, I remember him being told the next morning, yeah, he fell asleep on the radio like 3 times, calling in sit reps, because we were probed, and we didn't get anything else that night. But it was just one of those weird experiences that you go through that, it's an individual experience, but everybody experiences. Does it make sense? Anyways, well, we didn't get any more rockets or probes after that, and thank goodness, no harm, no foul. Anyways, I make a comment in there too that I have a revelation after that. The guy who yelled Allah Akbar, there's a time to praise God, but kill your enemy first and then praise God. That's what I learned from that.
Yeah, lucky for you, he did that in reverse order.
Yes, I'm very lucky. And I realized that in hindsight, that if he wouldn't have yelled, I wouldn't have turned my head, and that bullet probably wouldn't have missed me. I realized that. But thanks. I appreciate for the warning. I don't know if that guy's still alive, but I tell you what, Iraqis weren't cowards. They definitely were not cowards. And you saw that. They will stand and fight. Okay, on the where are we at here? 31. Yeah, 31 March. RCD-1 secures the Hudson Airfield while 3rd LAR continues to feint along Highway 1. RCD-7 conducts its limited objective attacks and civil affairs operations west of Highway 1. Division forward CP displaces in the vicinity of the airfield at Hattush and becomes a logistics hub. I remember we stopped there the next day as well. And I believe it was the next day. On the 1st of April, had an operative sleep for an hour and a half and stand to, awake and got a couple of copy going. And I remember this because these little things were like gold, good hot cup of coffee, even if it wasn't a full one. It just made the morning, it picked you up, picked your spirits up. And Chipperez and I put some water on. He got some cocoa. I got some coffee and creamer. We made a mocha and we split it. And just as I'm sitting there enjoying it, Staff Sergeant from Regimental Engineers comes up and tells me he's taking my ACE team back to regiment. So it's like dropped on record. So we start moving up a little bit later, an hour and a half later, company mounted up, moving north. Along the course, we find fire positions that fired at us the night before. We see the 120 millimeter mortars and then the rocket position. Also RPGs and grenades found around the road. So that was obviously a firing defensive position for them. We find one mortar, which they couldn't get the base plate unstuck. I don't remember if you saw that. It was still on the ground, the 120 millimeter mortar. They fired probably a few rounds without seating it right. And then, as artillery with a base plate, if it gets stuck in the mud, you have a hard time getting it out. No crews or small arms found. We passed a AAA site, destroyed. Soon pass Alpha Company in blocking position along Al Hay. We continue quickly north along Al Hay and pass Charlie Company in positions north of Al Hay. So Alpha is in south, and then Charlie's in north, and we pass through, and then Charlie's going to be in. As Alpha passes through, Charlie's going to take tail. Does that make sense? So now we're in the lead. Alpha's going to come through, and Charlie's going to follow. On 1 April, 3rd Battalion, 4th Marine conducts attacks in the Fedayeen holdouts in Diwania, killing or capturing as many as scattering remainder. Bravo Company on the 1st at 0630 were in a blocking position with battalion command elements, and Cobras are doing rocket runs about 3 clicks west of our position. I don't remember if you remember seeing the Cobra runs off to the west that morning. That was a clear. You could see what they were firing at. You could see secondaries going off. Airstrike, striking as April 1st, striking in an unexpected direction. RCT-5 attacks northeast up around Highway 27, seizing a bridgehead across the Saddam Canal. This move effectively isolates the Republican Guard Division, which is now stranded in El Kut. 8th Engineer Support Battalion constructs a 70-ton bridge across the canal to allow unimpeded tank movement up the road. And I remember they had the bridge, they call them the bridges fights, because they went from bridges to bridges. Some of them were uncrossable because they were destroyed by the Iraqis. They found one that was reasonably, and they built another one. Departing the blocking position as soon as all light was gone. Bravo was behind LAR and Cat, moving to Al Kut. Inchon 1 is now the bait. Inchon is now the bait. Remember, we're the feint. We're to draw the fire and focus from the eye, right? The eye of Sauron. It's looking at us. Okay, we halt for 6 hours in defense as the southern block, as units of the RCT move north along El Hay. On 2 April, as a base of fire for the main effort of attack, RCT-1 commences their limited objective firing attacks and engaging indirect counter battery fires with Iraqi defenders at Calcutta. And again, remember, 11th Marines set up. You had weapons companies set up. We're not that far from Al Kut at this point. 2 April, 5 April, RCT-5 attacks across the Numaniyah Bridge. 3-5 and 2nd Tank Battalion lead the way, whilst 2-5 and 1-5 clear and bypass route to the west and secure a second crossing site. Remember, that's why they had the Battle of the Bridges. 8th ESB builds a 145-meter bridge across the Tigris at Pearl 3. I'm not sure where that was located at. Start moving north, steady as Cat and LARs press targets north. And as you remember, we're moving north. LARs, they've got tows, they've got their chain gun, and then Cat's got the 40s and the 50 cals, and plus they have tows as well. So it's pretty. Plus they're calling supporting arms and air support that's circling ahead overhead anyways. So they're just bringing hell down on whoever decides to stand. On 2 April, we start moving RCT-7 as an exploitation force, sends 3-4 and first tanks across Numaniyah Bridge, blocking Highway 6 to the east, and 3-7 secures the city of Numaniyah, while 1-7 secures a nearby airfield. Division CP moves into Numaniyah airfield. And again, as we get closer and closer to Baghdad, we start to close off all those access from the south. Halt on the 06 on the 20 on the 2nd. We halt for opposition, suppress, and move on. On the 3rd, division continues its deliberate attack to destroy the Baghdad Bridge near Al Kut. RCT-17 attacks the edge of the city with the 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines on the north and 17 on the south. They advance on the edges of the urban areas, destroy the Baghdad's division 2 Western Brigades. Okay, we're back to Bravo Company here. On the 3rd, and again, there may be big lapses in my notes, because sometimes I'll go, like we're in a blocking position, I won't take notes unless I absolutely have to, or something triggers it to do so. So if I have big gaps in there, again, this is from my perspective. And we talked about maybe a project of having other members of the company fill in with daytime group memories of things that they may see triggered here. That way you can fill in more experiences, because on the 3rd, I may have only seen 1 or 2 things, but you may have seen other things, which you could fill in there and kind of give a greater picture of what the company was engaging in during that time. Okay, on the 3rd at 0730, day 14 since landing in the LZ, several squads round up hiding EPWs. Mission is to make noise, move fast, and keep up. On Route 7 North, 1-4 attacks opposing organized forces. Past one of the ACE vehicles off to the side, disabled by a mine or IED. To the west, a 23 millimeter unit was suppressed, and an unknown number of EPDs rounded up, including a Iraqi general. Combat engineers get to work and destroy the 23 millimeter ammo as close to the guns as possible to make a bonfire. Make noise, Al Kut ahead. We find a 75 millimeter recoilless rifle, load up, and keep moving out. Okay, now this is describing the next phase of what the RCT and Bravo Company went through here. Over the next few days, the attack to Baghdad, the division intended to maintain a tempo of its attack so as to reorientate an attack to Baghdad before the Al-Qut task was even complete, meaning they wanted RTC-7 and RCT-5 into southern Baghdad before we had completed our Al-Qut mission. But because of the troubles with the bridges, it didn't make it, although it wasn't as advanced as they wanted to be at that point. So as we move up to Al-Qut, that sets the stages. We're not as far along as we wanted to be before this feint actually come to fruition, but we are where we are. So this is describing that. On 3 April, led by 2nd Tank's Iron Horse, RCT-5 attacks Highway 6, up Highway 6. After 2 days in the attack, the RCT has covered 120 kilometers to Baghdad, defeating elements of the Al-Nida Republican Guard Division, the Fedayeen, and thousands of foreign paramilitary fighters. RCT-7 followed and reconnoitered the near shore of the Diyala River near the 2 existing bridges. RCT-1 made the long march from Al-Hay and rejoined the division at the Diyala. RCT-5 searched for a crossing to the north of the existing bridges, but found none that could support the RCT attack. After the Iraqis sabotaged the 2 southern bridges, RCT-7 prepared to conduct an assault river crossing. On 7 April, they attacked into the Rashid military complex in southeast Baghdad. Again, that was on the 7th. That was the same day we crossed. They attacked the Rashid military complex. On the northern flank, RCT-1 attacked into eastern Baghdad, seizing the DGS headquarters. I'm not sure what that is. I think that's their security services. Both forces penetrated the phase line RCT-1 or RCT-5, crossed the river and attacked to the north to establish a cordon around the city. So they went off to the west, towards the west and north. By the 9th of April, eastern Baghdad was cut off. RCT-7 secured multiple objectives in the downtown area, including the university, government centers. RCT-1 attacked and seized the DGS headquarters and Saddam City, a large Shia neighborhood. And again, the distinction about Saddam City, it's a huge area of Baghdad, which is a primary Shia neighborhood, but the rest of Iraq is primarily Sunni. So it's a big difference. It's like 2 different types of following the same religion, but 2 different sects. So they treat each other differently. The Shia, obviously, Saddam was a Sunni. You see the way he treated the Shia, right? They were happy to see us when we got into Saddam City. Some weren't, but most were. RCT-5 conducted a physical link-up with the 3rd U.S. Infantry Division in the Tigris Bridges. The eastern half of the city was secured by April 11th. Okay, we're back to Bravo Company now. On 8:30 on the 3rd, we reached a limit of advance to Al-Qut on Route 7 North. We can see the city about 2 clicks away. LAR tanks and close air support engaged at the bridges. Mission accomplished. End of feint. RCT-1 starts attacking in a new direction, Baghdad. Movement the way we came, now traveling on Route 7 South. Long road ahead as we move in to outmaneuver into the south, the underbelly of the Iraqi forces. And again, what we're doing is we did that long feint up Route 7 up to Al-Qut. We did our job. We held the forces in place. RCT-5 and 7 are now moving into the areas of southern Baghdad. They haven't crossed yet. We reached the feint, and now we got to go back down Route 7 the way we came. All those fights we had on the way up, we got to see if we're going to have them on the way back. And then we're heading in a new direction, which is that cross corridor connection they made between the 2 axes. Does that make sense? Remember, earlier we had described the supply corridor between the 2 axes of advance that was created after we crossed Nasiriyah. Well, this is the route we're going to take to link up with the other forces. So we got to go way down south and then head back north. And that's what RCT-1 is going to do. And that's what we're doing the next couple of days here. So on the 1305, On the 3rd, movement south and short halt before going back through Al Hay. Remember all those towns we had to block through and do short fight with the Fedayeen and paramilitary forces? We now have to do on the way back down. We passed Al Hay, stop and get RCT rounded up and continue south. At 1600, we passed Al Far and reaching the intersections of Route 7 and 17. Remember, that's where we took that incoming arty fire. Company traveling on 17 West continues at a rapid pace. Now we're moving west on 17. Before we did that blocking position east on 17, came back to the intersection. Now we're heading west to go link up with the rest of the division. With company traveling at 17 West at a rapid rate, all hands accounted for, no injuries. Reaching regimental resupply point to get out, refuel, and restretch Westford Ho. It gets dark fast and we're moving very steadily around Route 17 West. We, on the 2100, we halt in defense east of a small city of Afak. Totally burn out and fall asleep for 4 hours, just what I needed. Again, my personal notes. On the, just after 01, at the intersection of 17 and Highway 1, the RCT diverts to Highway 1 North. And then on 4 April, again, back to division notes, RCT 5 attacks west, destroying more foreign fighters and seizing the key Douala crossings just east of Baghdad. RCT 7 assumes the Diyala crossings, and RCT 5 pushes north to Dead General Crossroad. They had a battle there and killed the general. The site where the Special Republican Guard Staff Major General met his demise. The Division CP moves to the Diyala River. On the 4th, we halt the regimental resupply point to rearm and refuel, load up, and move up Highway North, or Highway 1 North within the hour. So again, we were moving Highway 17 west. We finally hit Highway 1 North, and we're moving to link up with the rest of the division. At 05, we halted another RRP for water and MREs. This was the airfield they had captured, the large resupply point along the highway where we got resupplied. It was actually sunny that day. Company had, and I mentioned that Company Gunny has things done before we even started. I mean, he had people resupplied and ammo and everything else before we even knew what was going on. At the stop, the picture of Sergeant Struseski was done. I don't have the photo. I just got this photo of the sketch.
I've got it. I'll put it up.
Yeah, that was a iconic photo. If you want to see a stud, you want to see a Marine, that he was a typical guy. He was down to earth, and he did a lot of good things before. Anyways, on 4 April at 6:30, movement diverts to paved road, moving north and east along the small town of Ash Somali, diverting again to Highway 27 east. Again, just because we're moving up north, we still have a different objective than RCT 5 and 7. So we've now moved north. We're gonna have to work our way up north and east of Baghdad. On 7:30 on the 4th, Pale Rider is moving fast again. I marked these locations on the move. Battalion is moving on Route 27 East in the upper corner of the Thomas Guide F6. So on. Back to page 5, because this in the Thomas Guide, sometimes these little corners, they're really hard to see the transitions sometimes. So, but that's where we were moving from one page to another. So it took a little while to figure that one out. Passing the Abu is the oil processing storage area. We see the Cobras making rocket and cannon runs on the targets west of the complex, and we see secondary explosions. At 09, heavy firing ahead, approaching Numaniyah. We stop at the Numaniyah Air Base. We halt for 24 hours. Pass through at 03 on the 5th. We pass through the city of Numaniyah on the west along Highway 27 east with 223 in a blocking position on the main route south of Numaniyah. We cross the Tigris River on the bridge spanning 400 meters. This will be the second of the 3 great rivers in Iraq. We cross the Euphrates at the Jisr al-Jari Bridge in Nasiriyah, and now the Tigris at Numaniyah, which leaves the Diyala in Baghdad. And on the 5th of April, let's see here. We're on the north side of the river now. Remember, we just crossed the river. Again, blocking positions, we move across the river. Now we're moving up on the opposite side of a major waterway than RCT 5 and 7. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're on the north side of the river in a palm grove adjacent to a home subdivision. The company captures S-60, which is an anti-aircraft artillery battalion intact, including an estimated 15 pallets of ammunition. We didn't have time to hold, so combat engineers placed delayed charges on all the ammo pallets and barrels. And I remember this was it was a wooded area, but there were buildings and apartments nearby. And I remember as we were leaving, the civilians yelling and warning everybody, get out, get out, get out. And pallets were, as we drove away, the pallets were going off. And these 57 millimeters are flying everywhere. You know, along the way, we see, you ever see that picture of the USS Shaw, which blew up in Pearl Harbor? The massive magazine explosion. It's an iconic photo if you ever go back and look at it. That's why I remember that fireball looking like big secondaries going off in the air and just debris flying everywhere. That's I think Company Gunny and I had a good laugh about that later on, because a couple of days later we blew something else up and we used a little too much charge, and the CO was getting really pissed off at us. We were blowing everything up. Anyways, so we passed several more destroyed anti-aircraft units and a T-62 along the way. At 0430, we're leaving Highway 27 and turning north on Highway 6. And again, this is where on the Google Maps, it would make sense, because you see this zigzagging going on as we start to move through the available space up towards the east side of Baghdad. So we're doing this back and forth, creeping up there, but we're trying to do it as quickly as possible. So we hit Highway 6, located at an intersection, was a destroyed field artillery piece. Traveling north on Highway 6 on the north side of the Tigris, mostly small family farms along the river. We didn't have a whole lot of opposition from the farmland there. We halt near a destroyed T-62 for movement ahead, heavy firing at a steady rate, Hail Rider pushing forward. As we start getting closer and closer to these major cities, we start to experience that again. On 5th of April, 3-7 conducts an attack at Salman Pak Terrorist Training Facility, Chemical Weapons Lab, and Palace Compound. On the 5th at 05:55, the company sweeps an area, including several buildings. While sweeping area, Corporal Trueblood, an attachment from 2nd Combat Engineers, engages several armed men, getting off 4 shots before they fade away. And when I mean fade away, they're running as he's trying to take a stance and shot. So he's lucky to get a few shots off, but I don't think he hit anything. But they continue. You know, you've seen it before. You know what I mean? When they want to fade away, you're going to fade away. And they did. They faded fast. We pushed after them, and in a little shit creek that, you know, where you have the reeds come up, and then you have a little creek that's maybe a foot, 2 feet deep, 3 feet deep. They tossed a field radio and one of those satchels of grenades, RPGs in there. So I was reaching for, I got the grenades, but then I was trying to get the radio out, and I was reaching for the radio. My left foot slipped off into the shit creek, and my whole boot got soaked to the top. Even it flowed in. So now my boot's wet. I'm cussing now. So I'm recovering this gear. We get back, and I get with the company, and we do a tally. And we end up locating 6 field radios, 22 mines, 62 RPGs. And my notes have a destroyed 1133, which I think is the LAR ambulance. I went back to research it. It said it's the Stryker vehicle, but in the Marines, we use it as the LAR ambulance. We remained in this area for several hours until sunup. And so that area where we found all that equipment, we ended up staying there for a little while. We stayed busy because I don't remember having a chance to change my boot yet. Pale Rider, which is 1-4, halts at the RRP Expedition Airfield near that grid, which is not that far up. So while at this Well, at this hall, I hear a gunshot. You got to remember, we're kind of herringbone. This gunshot's not far away, but it sounded like it was from inside the vehicle, one of the vehicles. At first, thinking something went off like a negligent discharge. 50 feet from where I'm at, I hear someone yell out, "Hey, Corbin up!" And responded, I find Lance Corporal Ryan White, an assaultman from weapons platoon with a gunshot through his right femur, so his upper right leg. He has a gunshot. He was saying before he started going to shock, "Because I didn't do it. I didn't do it." At first, looked like a negligent from his M9. He was carrying a Beretta, but on assessment, as I took off his gear to give him some breathing, I started work on him. He didn't have a belt holster or a drop holster like I carried a drop holster. He carried an M9 using the green issue holster with the D-ring that lifts up, and he had it attached to his flak jacket just above his right waist. So it was higher on his waist than it normally would have been on a belt. Does that make sense? So witnesses told me that what was he doing when the gunshot went off? He was trying to reach something on the side of the track out of his pack. So he's jumping up and down. And, with all that gear on, you get a little tired. So he couldn't get it the first time, so he kept trying to do it. And one of the times he came down, his elbow came down on the holster. And when I took his gear off, I opened the holster. It was still, the D-ring was still locked. I opened it up. The weapon was off safe, and there was a round not fully ejected because the holster was closed. So he had hit the weapon off safe, hammer forward, weapon loaded, condition 1. It went off when he hit the back of that hammer with a quick force. I've never experimented to see if that could happen, but that's the best explanation I can give you, that what I found, because I was the witness that opened up the holster and the round wasn't completely ejected out of the chamber. Does that make sense? So it had discharged and the casing hadn't been fully ejected, and it couldn't load a new one because it couldn't eject the old one. And so we ended up getting him taken care of. He wasn't like, he didn't hit an artery, so it was a quick. Corbin was right there on him. They had him because we were at an aid station. They sent him over to the regimental aid station. They got him evacuated. The helicopter came in, and got him. Right, he was in and out of there right away. So we lost a man. Of course, he didn't want to go either. These guys, it wasn't fatal, and we had him gone within a few minutes. I don't remember seeing him after that. I don't know if I ran into him back at Horno afterwards or not. If I did, I hope he's well, and I hope he fully recovered. On 6 April, hold on, we're back up here to on 1900. Yeah, we passed Al Sayed on movement north, halting in defense position. And this is where, again, from the night before, the morning before at 4 o'clock in the morning, I fell in that shit creek. And then with the gunshot wound and medevac and Lance Corporal White, I didn't get a chance to change my socks. So I finally started to do it because it was getting painful. It really started to itch really bad. So I finally did remove my boots and socks. The bottom skin of my left heel came off with the sock, just peeled right off. I mean, a big thick chunk of it. So now I got raw pink skin on my heel, and then on my upper part is still that thick Camp Horno billy goat skin, that we got from humping those hills. I swear Colonel Mayer was a billy goat. He just, yeah. After months of hiking the hills of Camp Pendleton, yeah, it became hard. I put some powder on, dry socks, same boots, moved on. But that bothered me for like a week more, really bad. I noticed it. April 6th, RCT-5 led by the Highlanders, searching for the banks of the Diyala, find a crossing site north of Baghdad. RCT-5 has multiple crossing engagements with the Republican Guard. Trying to cross a river under fire is not an easy thing. And I think you saw some iconic photos of that. On RCT-5 trying to secure the bridges. Movement continues at 02 on the 6th. We continue to move west and push to Baghdad. We come across an area of heavy fighting. There is a damaged M1A1 and a burnt M1A1. So one of them hit an IED, it looked like, and the other one had been damaged. And again, the rest is the division notes and in green. I only made it up to the 6th or 7th. I think I might. Let me check here on the. Yeah, that was the last entry right there. So that's the end of part 1, I guess. And as you know, from the 6th, we started to move into. From the top of my head, I remember we moved to a blocking position east of Baghdad, but and still east of the Diyala River.
I know your notes in, but can we just wrap up like assaulting across the Diyala and going into Saddam City? And I know we had significant engagements in Saddam City, clearing out buildings and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would have to see, the reason I got stuck here is because we started doing these little moves once we went off the hard road, and we would take these little moves on the 6th, and we ended up in a blocking position north of the rest of the regiment. 1-4 was to the north, and we were in a blocking position probably maybe 6 or 7 kilometers north down the road. So we ended up on the morning of the 7th, we ended up having to load up, climb, and drive back that 6 or 7 kilometers, and we took followed a path to cross where we got in a position where we could cross the Diyala River. And you got good pictures of that. I mean, there's enough of those around there to illustrate that. It was, luckily we weren't doing it under direct fire. You'd hear some shots now and then from different places, but so on the morning of the 7th, we crossed, and that day we cleared out that area east of Baghdad. We're not into Baghdad proper yet. We're still on the outskirts, more like your county zone. Instead of you have city zones, and then you have county zones, and then you have these really, really, agricultural areas. We're out of the agricultural area. We're now into the county areas, where, if that makes any sense. I mean, there's more buildings, there's more roads. It's not built up like a city yet, but you're seeing more infrastructure. Vice where we had come through the agriculture area, where the cities were small and they were very far apart. Now you're starting to see the facilities closer together across the river. You've got smaller towns, and then you see the city off in the distance, or it's off in the distance. So we ended up crossing. Yeah, after we crossed, we reassembled as a company, and by company we moved north because the Diyala splits a couple clicks north of where we crossed into a subsidiary, a substream for a canal for agriculture. So we moved up to along the canal, and that's where we found that Air Force Colonel's house.
Can you refresh my memory, or it kind of explain? So when we crossed the Diyala, and I remember we got on the other side, we rolled through a small town, and then going through that town, we started to make a movement towards. There was probably a tree line about anywhere between like 700 to 800 meters in front of us, and then I remember the trackers yelling out, specifically the gunner yelling out BMPs in the tree line, and then the ramps drop, and then the whole company gets out on line, and we start assaulting this tree line. And then once we get to it, it turns out there was enemy armor, and there are BMPs, T-55s, but they had been abandoned just before the Iraqis fled, just before we assaulted it. I mean, there was still like cooking rice over a fire left. I mean, they fled. They took off. But I just remember in my head, had they stayed the fight, it would have been a bad day.
Like I said, I don't think they were expecting us to cross there. I think they were expecting us to go north and try to cross one of the several bridges that we end up capturing later on.
Yeah.
But I think what they were expecting was they weren't expecting a river crossing. I'll tell you that.
Right.
They were expecting the Marines to wade across the river and the way we operate. And when we did that, we that was the 7th. We didn't move very far on the 7th. We just crossed the river, consolidated, security area. And then we moved out on the 8th, and that's when we started to move into Al Hamza and Saddam City. And then, and again, it was kind of a peaceful night. We had patrols out on the 7th. We had watch out. Nothing spectacular that night. Most of the action came the next morning. Early, like I said, we started that dance off when we blew this guy's house up. We moved out. And then we moved down the road. And I remember going along the canal to our right as we're moving west towards Saddam City. Or a small town, first came a town called El Hamza. And then the Saddam City was west of that. So as we're moving west now into eastern Baghdad, we crossed this small town and we're traveling along the canal. And the company's mission was to secure a bridge as we enter into Al Hamza, which is a major route out of Baghdad. So we were going to capture the bridge. We weren't to cross it, weren't to secure the other side. We were just to secure our side of the bridge.
This is this is the very big bridge, right?
Right. Well, it's a bigger bridge. Anyway, so the order of battle for the company was 2nd platoon, 1st platoon, 3rd platoon. And 2nd platoon was supposed to secure the bridge. 1st platoon was supposed to go forward. And 3rd platoon was supposed to take a hard movement to the left. And then, but it didn't work out that way because when we came up to Al Hamza, or even before that, as we're moving on, let me clarify here. I'm the last track in the company moving towards us. Now, the Humvees didn't come across the river at that point. So I'm in the last track, and you see these Toyota trucks, the white Toyota trucks, I forget what we call them. The Fedayeen get them in, and they do little running gunfights, take stop shots and drive off, right? And that's what they were doing on the other side of the canal. As these trucks would pop out, they'd take they'd empty a magazine, and you see the rounds all over the place, and then they'd drive off, and we'd get a few shots off at them, and that's how it went there for a few minutes until we entered Al Hamza. And then we hit Al Hamza, and the 2nd platoon was going to secure the bridge. Instead of stopping, he crossed the bridge. And when he crossed the bridge, the first track across the bridge took an RPG to the bow. Luckily, the bow plane took the full brunt of the RPG and didn't penetrate the hull. You could see the frag spalling on the outside of the hull, but it didn't penetrate. So he got lucky, but he wasn't supposed to cross the bridge. He crossed all the way, which drew 1st platoon into the fight. Because instead of going forward, now he's engaged to try to help 2nd platoon get out of the fight he was in. So now as 3rd platoon's coming in, I'm the last track in. 3rd platoon's off to the south. 1st platoon's off to the north, trying to suppress across the river. 2nd platoon's across the river, which they shouldn't have been. And now I pull up into the intersection where all that is. And one of the Marines yells to me that there's a trench line in front of these houses. And just then I see this head pop up. And I run along the trench. And as I see this head pop up, this guy starts to climb out of it. And I start to take a few shots at him. And as I take a few shots at him, I realize he's wearing a Letterman's jacket. You know what I mean? Like a high school Letterman's jacket. And so I stopped firing. And I'm like, what the fuck? And then as I look over right in front of this, where this guy popped out of the trench, there's a house. And there's a guy dressed all in black, Fedayeen, from head to toe, just standing there in a doorway like, I'm a bad motherfucker. What are you going to do about it? And I was shocked. I was like, he's like 25 feet away. When this guy came out of this trench, and the reason I missed the guy, because I think he was too close. I picked up my M16 and shot at him. He probably could have hit him if I fired my pistol, but I think the M16, because I was aiming at his head, I think it went over him. Anyway, so I go to tap the corporal next to me. I said, you see that fucker? And by the time I turned back around, he's gone. I mean, I didn't take a shot at him. And again, at that point, I felt like I was being baited. He wanted me to fire at that house. And luckily we did, because as we went in to inspect the house, there was a family tied up in the corner. And there was all kinds of ammunition spread all over the floor. So it was a good thing we didn't light up the house. but at the same time, you always got those regrets. You know, was he the guy, or did he, did he hurt someone else? Those are the demons we play with, right? And you try to reason and find middle ground and solace sometimes. Anyway, so I see this guy and I'm in shock. And by the time I turn around, he's gone. So now we go to clear the house and we find the family and all this. And just as we're coming out that, we started to get back in the track. And one of the corporals that was with us in the track, Corporal Link, he ended up getting shot in the neck by a ricochet. It hit the AAV turret right underneath where, where they have the corner welds, where the turret spins, and it hit right underneath that ring, and it ricocheted up and bam, hit him in the neck. It was still a nasty wound, but it was a ricochet. It still had a lot of kinetic to it. So we started to evacuate him, and just as we're doing that, here comes the battalion CP rolling up, catching up with us. So they're rolling up, so we get him to the ambulance, and just as reported to the XO, because he's want to know what's going on, who we're evacuating, what happened, we hear the call for another man down. And we go hop in his track, the company gunny and I, with the XO, we hop in his track and he races over to first platoon, who's, remember, in a firefight across the river, trying to fire it across the river. And we find that PFC Garza, Juan Guadalupe Garza, I remember his name. He got shot in the back, and he was dead instantly. Anyways, we got there. They were working on him, trying to do CPR. He still had his vest on. They were trying to do CPR. We ended up taking it off, trying to work on him, but we didn't know it at the time. But it looked like he'd been shot right through the heart. We ended up getting him loaded up and getting out of there. And I remember seeing that because he had the one plate in the front, and he was shot in the back, and the bullet was still in the front plate, but on the back side of the front plate. That's hard to accept. That they let us go into little things like that. I guess it's better no protection, right? But
it's important to note that this is in the middle of a city. I mean, there's buildings everywhere.
Yeah, you don't really know where it came from. That's why I say that one guy I saw, that haunts me. Could that be the guy that shot him? No, I don't know. It could have came from across the river. Who knows where it came from? But we ended up having to clear that whole side of the river anyways. Remember later on after that,
right.
I'll tell you, after that, I saw the war face go on a lot of Marines. They weren't taking quarter after that. Just the way it is. And it sucks, a tragedy. But we try to do the right thing. And anyway, so we go and evacuate PFC Garza, get him over to the aid station. Remember that I think Lucian took a picture, or someone did, of the corpsman put a flag across the stretcher, and they loaded him up into the AAV and took him for medevac. And then we went right back and we cleared the next 2 blocks. And after that day kind of became a blur after that, because it was the same repetition. Clear buildings, move tracks, clear buildings, move tracks, get a count, clear buildings, move tracks, get a count, clear buildings, move tracks. And as we started clearing and moving more east, we found more and more people coming out and waving at us, and the firefights started to calm down. At least on our end. I think in the south they still had quite a bit, but we weren't getting it like RCT-5 was once we crossed. Like I said, the initial engagements, and then after that it was we moved into Saddam City, and we went to the security or police forces center, and that was I think that was on the morning of the 9th. That we're there at the police station. Captain Gomez, Lieutenant Shaw go in. We have, I think, 4 or 5 tracks outside, and people started to gather. And I remember this vividly because each track had maybe 20, 30 people around it. Some of them were waving, and some of them were pretty upset. And I remember one guy who, if you can picture this, he had no shirt on. Again, it's April. It's not that cold. It's cool, but it's not that cold. He had no shirt on, but he had his hands behind his back, and he kept yelling at me and coming closer and closer and closer. And I'm standing on the top of the track. We didn't have the door down, the ramp down, and I'm standing on the back of the track, and I've got my rifle in one hand, and I've got the drop holster right there, and I'm not trying to pose a threat. I turned the other way, and this guy just kept coming closer and closer and closer. And it looked like, I'm thinking, man, this guy's got a fucking grenade, and I'm going to get fucked. So I kept warning him, and finally I pulled a pistol out, and the guys next to him grabbed it and pulled him back. And I told him, thank you. So they weren't all our enemies. They weren't all our enemies. There were good people there, too. They didn't want to see bloodshed.
I vividly remember, even as a young man, I vividly remember an old man like grabbing me by the hands and saying, like, what took you guys so long?
I know.
I mean, the emotion and most of those people, like, I don't remember getting flicked off during that. All I remember was the jubilant, cheers and everything else. And but yeah, that old man grabbing me by the hands and saying in English, I mean, complete, perfect English, like, did you guys know what was going on here? Like,
yeah,
what took
murdered. Yeah. I mean, you could say whatever reason agree to, one country invades another country, whatever the establishment deep state reasons were for invading Iraq. Liberating the people was still the right. I think it was the right thing to try to do on our part, because we didn't go there to, like I said, the Iraqi people weren't our enemy.
Well, I guess that pretty much wraps up the invasion, because after that, we pretty much transitioned into security and stability operations. So
right. I remember through the 9th through the 20th was the patrol and secure. Right. We'd go get persons of interest. We'd go pick them up. We'd go hunt them down or whatever. We do little raids here and there, and we do patrols. Mostly, keep people calm, that kind of thing. And then on the 20th is when we did our movement down south to Hilla and to Babylon to become the security company down there. So we did that until, I want to say, August or September. We were supposed to leave in July. And General Mattis told us, oh, sorry, guys. RCT 1's going to be the last one to go. And then when the RCT left, sorry, Bravo. You're a security company for the division. And remember, we were one of the last companies of the entire division to get out of there that did the invasion. And it just happened to be that way. So we ended up staying until almost the end of September. Get back, leave. There was so much that went on between the 20th of April and the end of September too. There fantastic work done.
Right.
More
that's a whole other. That's a whole other stream.
Yeah, that's why I say to me, the time on ship, the actual combat operations, and then the stability and security operations they're all different phases for me, the way I look at it. But most importantly I think that training phase is where we made our money, because that was, like I said, we threw this battalion together in the last few months, and untrained, untested, majority under 25, even in the majority of that, even under 21. I think Juan Garza was only 19 years old.
PFC also. I mean,
yeah, young kid, good kid too. Very young company. That's why I wanted to do something like this, to get the word out that, hey, don't get discouraged. Marines, you're once a Marine, always a Marine. You joined for the right reason. Your heart's in the right place. Don't let what's going on nowadays detract from what you've accomplished, because you're still a Marine, and now you're just entering the next phase of what we're asking you to do is pay attention, what's going on, and stand to fight.
All right. So Sergeant Major Archambault, United States Marine Corps, retired. Once again, I want to commend you for taking the time and effort to put all this together and put down on paper and share your experiences and your thoughts. And I mean, again, even going through this, I was a young Marine at the time. I never kept a journal, and just being able to see this date and time and hell grids in some cases, I mean, that's just amazing work. And for you to preserve history and our legacy as a battalion and rifle company, I mean, that's amazing. And future generations will know what we did and when we did it because of your work. So again, I commend you for doing that, and from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate that.
That's part of the training, right? The anal attentiveness. You got to remember, I was an artillery fire controlman, so even as a young NCO, you always had to know your location at any time because they can call fire mission. You got to stop the vehicle, know your location for artillery. You don't know where you're at, you're in trouble.
Right.
You're going to kill somebody, the wrong people. So you always had to know where you're at, what the situation was, listen to the radios. So this is all stuff I was groomed on anyways as a young Marine. And then my own battery as an operations chief, I wasn't a commander obviously, but as an operations fire controlman, and then becoming an operations chief in artillery, and then going to teach at the artillery school, not just the Marine artillery, but it's an Army international school. So I got to teach foreign students as well. And the art of manual gunnery. And you know that with machine gunnery, long distance machine gunnery, there's an art to it. And it takes practice and skill. It's not something you're just going to go out and start nailing. And you got to practice at it and know how to do it. So yeah, that was just one of those byproducts of that. It was learning how to keep your awareness.
All right. Well, I think this is a good stopping place. Once again, I want to appreciate Sergeant Major Archambault for putting all this together, and I hope you guys got something out of this, a little history lesson. And appreciate everybody watching. Semper Fidelis, and keep fighting a good fight.
Amen.